Dee Perkins, moderator for Meet the Candidates for State Senate. I would like to welcome the public to this event and thank you for your interest. On November 4th, you will have the opportunity to vote for your state senator in Augusta. The candidates have been provided with some questions prior to this broadcast, and tonight we are offering a new element in our format. The candidates have provided some talking points, which are issues particularly important to them. We hope to offer an informative discussion of issues and topics that affect the state of Maine and the town of Gorham. In the municipal chambers tonight, we have candidate and present Senator James Boyle, District 30, and his challenger, candidate Amy Volk. Welcome, candidates, and thank you for your participation. We will start off with opening comments. Prior to the show, we flipped a coin, so Representative Volk will be leading us off. We will rotate through the rest of the questions so candidates have an equal opportunity to go first. Representative Volk.
Thank you so much, Dee Dee. And thank you for hosting this forum. It's wonderful that the citizens of Gorham are going to get to see that there really is a big difference between Jim Boyle and myself. And I've been looking forward to this as a landmark part of my campaign. So many people that I meet along the campaign trail feel as though all politicians are the same, and they're really fed up. They feel like it doesn't matter what they vote or who they vote for. And I would say that I don't consider myself to be a politician, and I would hazard a guess that Jim Boyle also doesn't consider himself primarily to be a politician. Ours is a citizens' legislature, and it's intended that it be filled with people who have other occupations in life, not just spending time in the halls of the State House. So let me tell you who I am. I'm a mom of 4 children between the ages of 10 and 23. I've been married 25 years to my high school sweetheart, Volk, who is president of his family's 3rd-generation manufacturing business right in Biddeford, Maine. I've had my own business, Personally Yours, printing custom stationery and invitations from my home while I was home raising my children. And I've also been a substitute teacher. During that time, I've also had the privilege of serving on the boards and volunteering my time for many, many different organizations, from the Leche League, supporting pregnant and breastfeeding moms, to working as a volunteer for Ingraham, counseling people who are at risk of abusing their children. And I'm also currently serving on the boards of the Scarborough Cheering Club, the Root Cellar in Portland, which gives free health care and dental care to Portland's neediest. 4 years ago, I came home and said that I believe I could run for office in order to make a difference. Let me tell you what I've accomplished in that time. I fought hard to pass my sex trafficking bill when leaders in Augusta told me no. I also believe that able-bodied people deserve a hand up and not a handout, because we can't help the truly needy if we aren't smart in our compassion. And I also believe in working together, which is why I fought hard to send bullying legislation back to committee, believing that Democrats and Republicans could work together in order to protect our children. And I was also named one of the most bipartisan legislators in Augusta by the Sunlight Foundation. I'm conscientious, compassionate, and cooperative, and I think in the next hour I'll earn your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Boyle.
Thank you, Dee Dee, and thank you, Gorham Cable TV, for having us. Thank you, Amy, for joining me, and thank you in the audience for being here as well. It's an important evening for us both. When I'm going house to house, talking to voters, talking to residents throughout the district, Gorham, Scarborough, currently Westbrook, and soon to be Buxton, where I'm talking to folks now, the biggest question people ask, what everyone wants to know, is why the heck are you putting yourself through that? What were you thinking, kind of thing? And I say, well, I've been in Maine a long time. I work hard. And I've spent some time up in the halls of the legislature in my work life. I first started working in the Northern Maine woods for Great Northern Paper in 1978. I've worked at lumber company in Sanford. I've worked at utilities, and in 1996 I started my own business, and I've been doing that for 18 years, doing environmental consulting, and I have 5 scientists who work for me doing that, and an office manager. And the time I spent in the legislature, I got familiar with a little bit with how it works, and I learned a couple things. One is that there are a lot of decisions that are made that are not terribly well informed, particularly on what I view as good science. And the other thing I learned, even more important, is that the legislature is made up of average citizens. As Amy just said, it's a citizen legislature, and I think that's been really driven home for me since I arrived up there to serve, is that people from all walks of life in Maine are really working hard on behalf of citizens. It's much harder than I knew, and I think than most people realize when they first run. It's also very rewarding. We get a lot of difficult, challenging calls from constituents, and it's a lot to learn in a hurry, but we have good support there, and we do the best we can to serve as many people as we can. I'm the Senate Chair of the Environment Committee, and I also serve on the Agriculture, Conservation, Forestry Committee. I appreciate the opportunity to have served the citizens of District 6, and I'm hoping they'll see fit to re-elect me. Thank you.
Thank you. Move on to question 1. And Senator Boyle, you'll lead off the answer to this one. In recent years, the state, due to its own budget worries, has repeatedly reduced revenue sharing funds that by law should be going to local towns like Gorham. What do you think of this process? Do you think the towns will ever receive the funds they have been legally promised?
Well, I think the municipal revenue sharing process is a good one. It was started in the 1970s. 5% of income tax receipts that went to Augusta would then be redistributed back to municipalities. It stayed at 5% for many, many years, and then in more recent years it's been cut down from that 5%. When I first arrived in the beginning of 2013, the beginning of the first session after I was elected, we heard that all revenue sharing would be cut to 0, and I was shocked. I didn't know that could happen. We now know the history of what happened. I think certainly legislators do. The proposal was to cut it to 0, and in the end there was a lot of bipartisan discussion, negotiation, and municipal share, more than half of the municipal revenue sharing was put back to the towns. Unfortunately, that's not enough, and I know this from personal experience because I talk to people. I've talked to thousands of people just since April, since I've been campaigning again, and it's one of the most important concerns, along with jobs and the economy, that people have in this district. So I do believe, I'm optimistic that we can get revenue sharing back to what it's historically been at 5%.
Thank you. Representative Volk.
Thank you. Well, I do agree that it's been all too easy for the legislature to pass the state's budget woes down to municipalities in the form of cutting revenue sharing. It is important for us to recognize, though, that this actually is not the first administration to cut revenue sharing. The Baldacci administration actually also cut revenue sharing. It certainly places too much pressure on local property tax, and I feel very, very confident that one of the things that this state needs the most is comprehensive tax reform. When you think of a three-legged stool, you think of a balanced approach to taxation, which would involve a third, approximately, of your revenue coming from property tax, approximately a third of your revenue coming from sales tax, and approximately a third of your revenue coming from the income tax. And that would be the healthiest situation for our state and for our budget, so that we would have more predictability and more ability to invite investment into our state. I was part of a bipartisan group which became known as the Gang of 11. It was made up of 5 Democrats, 5 Republicans, led by an independent senator, Senator Dick Woodbury, and I was one of the founding members of that group. And the legislation that we proposed would have brought significant relief for lower income and elderly people who are struggling to pay their property tax bills. And it would have also exported some of the tax burden to people who are visiting our state but still using our infrastructure. They're using our highways, they're using our hospitals sometimes. And then also part-time residents, because anyone now who lives here less than 6 months a year, in essence, is getting a pretty sweet deal because they are not having to pay any income tax. And so this would have been a more global way of taxing. I also support the restoration of 1% of revenue sharing going into a fund that municipalities would apply to, so that they could use that money in order to explore ways of collaborating with other communities. Local control and regional management, I think, may be the way we need to go in the future in the state of Maine.
Thank you. On the ballot, there are 6 bond issues representing funds up to $42 million. Which bonds do you think will do the most good for the state of Maine, and why? Representative Volk.
Well, certainly, when we are talking about bonding, we need to choose wisely. We need to make sure that those investments that we're making with tax dollars are going to pay off in the end. The other party actually had hundreds of millions of dollars in bonds that they proposed. This current package represents the best of the best in projects at a level that we can afford here in the state. Our bonding right now and our debt level is currently below national and New England averages. So I'm very confident that all of these bond issues are good bond issues. This was a bipartisan package voted on by the legislature, and my experience on the Labor, Commerce, Research, and Economic Development Committee has really shown me how important particularly research and development jobs are to this state. They're high quality, high paying jobs, and every one of these bond packages encourages job growth in those areas. It is critical for us to bring these high quality jobs to Maine, and I encourage voters to support them. They've been thoroughly vetted.
Thank you. Senator Boyle.
Thank you. Well, I agree, they're all important. Which bonds would do the most good for the state of Maine and why? I first would look to bond issue 3. It's a bond issue of $4 million of funds to insure loans to small businesses. Small businesses are the growth engine of our economy in Maine and nationally, and so that for me would be the first and most important bond issue. The second would be the water quality bond, and that may be because I helped shepherd it through the legislature as chair of the Senate Environment and Natural Resources Committee. But the reason that it's important is that tourism depends on high-quality natural resources and water quality in the state of Maine. And as most of you know, tourism is our $6 billion industry. And if we lose our water quality, if we have algae blooms, and that sort of thing that we're seeing in Midwestern states, if it starts to happen here, we reach a tipping point where water quality deteriorates rapidly, that would be disastrous for the Maine tourism economy. So that one really stands out as an important one. Thank you.
Thank you. At this point, we're going to move into the talking points. The first talking point, this is an opportunity for each of the candidates to describe an idea that they feel will be beneficial to the citizens of Maine. Candidates, you may have up to 5 minutes for your answer. And we will start with Senator Boyle. Your talking point is economic opportunity and job creation. Can you explain your position?
Right. Thank you. Well, yes, economic. That's what we hear about from everybody at the doors, and we talk about in the legislature, and we're working hard to improve our economic situation. One of the ways that we did that, and I supported this in the legislature, was the Maine Seed Capital Tax Credit Program. That's a program in which investors can get a break on their taxes by investing in small startup businesses that need support when they're in the early growth phase, and that's a really important program. It was set to expire, and I spoke to Ben Polito, who started Pike Energy here in Gorham, and when that bill came up, he was the person I spoke with at length about that, because he was living it and experienced it and was a big supporter of that and recognized the value. Here was a guy, he and 2 MIT classmates started a business right here in Gorham, and they took advantage of that program. In the past, when it was funded and it had expired, he recognized and pointed out to me, and I think rightly so, that without a program like that, it would make it much more difficult to get the startup capital that a little business like his would need. So that was a very important issue that I supported. I'm a big supporter of public education, pre-K through the university system. My parents were the first in their generations to attend University of Maine and met there. I attended University of Maine and graduated from there. Both of my children have graduated from there. We need to support this system. All of the scientists that I have working for me have either a bachelor's or a master's from the University of Maine system. So we know that the University of Maine system is struggling with budgets and declining enrollments. We need, as legislatures, to recognize that and do everything we can to address that, because to grow the kind of science jobs that we have, that I have in my business, that Pike Energy has, fluid imaging technologies, those are the high-growth businesses that rely on advanced education, and that's where the growth will be in our future.
Thank you. Representative Volk, your talking point is economic development and job growth. Can you explain your position?
Sounds familiar.
It does.
Well, obviously, having served 4 years on the Labor, Commerce, Research, and Economic Development Committee, this is a subject near and dear to my heart. And I also just want voters to know that Maine Economic Research Institute rated me as very strong, 88% on their scale. And I was very disappointed to see where my opponent and my current senator rated on that scale. I was also endorsed recently by the National Federation of Independent Businesses, which represents small businesses in Maine and all over the country. We only have 1,800 manufacturers currently in the state of Maine, and that's really concerning. They represent 50,000 jobs, which is no small amount, to be sure, but we seem to be losing them rapidly. Just in the last year, we've had 3 mills close, and it's just devastating to the people in these communities, some of which I have family members in. In fact, my cousin Wally is going to be laid off in the Bucksport mill. He's an engineer, and I really hope he can find employment elsewhere. One of the biggest reasons that we are losing manufacturers in the state of Maine is global competition. But global competition doesn't always mean China. A lot of times it means another state. And my family supplies manufacturers in the state of Maine, providing shipping boxes to manufacturers actually all over New England. And so manufacturing is not dead, and Volk Packaging actually is thriving because of innovation. But energy costs are a huge concern. When you consider that the Bucksport mill was paying 18 cents per megawatt, and down in Georgia they only pay 8 cents, you understand what we're up against. One of the things that I think would be most important for us to do regarding energy costs is lifting the 100 megawatt cap on hydropower. Hydroelectric power is absolutely clean. It's absolutely abundant in the state of Maine, and it's completely renewable. And we have decommissioned dams, as well as we would have the ability to possibly be able to purchase cheap power from Quebec if we were to lift that 100 megawatt cap, which is an artificial cap limiting our renewable energy from that source. And then we also have natural gas, which we need to continue to invest in. This administration has made some really important investments in getting natural gas to a lot of our manufacturers and our employers, but we need to continue to do that. We need to, where we can, we need to also extend that to residential use as well. And then lastly, again, I'm going to bring up tax reform, because when you are trying to recruit an executive to Jackson Labs or to Fluid Imaging Technologies or Yodel, and they look at our tax structure and our high cost of living, and they say, I'm going to be taking an 8% cut in pay right off the top, so thanks but no thanks, you have a problem. And so I am really, really committed to tax reform. I think it's very, very important so that we can begin to draw investment into our state. So those are the things that are most important to me. I believe those, if we could just even do those two things, then we would begin to see an economy that's growing and thriving. People want to live in Maine. Businesses want to be located here. And I just think that right now we have some barriers that we really need to look at taking down.
Thank you. Moving on to the third question. As a member of the State House, you are provided with health insurance. The state has determined that they will not expand the Affordable Care Act to include more low-income people. Why should the taxpayers provide health insurance to you when there are poor Mainers that cannot afford health care? Representative Volk.
Thank you. This question, I think, may be a little bit of a misunderstanding because legislators are actually employees of the state, and as such, we do take part in, or we have the ability to take part in employer-supplied health insurance, which, like it or not, is the system that we have here in the United States. So, we can debate that or not, whether we should have single payer, but I don't think that's really what the intent of the question is. But I know, for example, that I actually do take part in the health insurance program that we are offered, and for my family alone, it's over $1,000 a month, and the deductible is just slightly lower than what I would be paying if we got our insurance through my husband's company. One of the things that I think this question is getting at is the issue of Medicaid expansion. And it's important for voters to understand that Maine expanded Medicaid in 2002. We actually doubled the number of people who were enrolled in Medicaid, and that is actually what led us to the debt that we owed to the hospital, where we owed literally hundreds of millions of dollars to Maine's hospitals. The Affordable Care Act has some issues, and one of those issues is certainly this gap between the 100% poverty and the 138% of poverty. When the Supreme Court issued their ruling, it's sort of what that states would have the option of whether or not to expand Medicaid. Nobody went back and fixed this gap. So we do have people between 100% of poverty and 138% of poverty not able to participate in possibly be able to afford their employees' health insurance or be able to participate in Medicaid. However, we do have federally qualified health care centers, 151 across the state, that offer free care. We also have hospitals that offer sliding scales for low-income folks. I do want to add I remain open to Medicaid expansion, but just not given the current offer that the federal government is giving the state of Maine.
Thank you. Senator Boyle?
Well, the question is, why should the taxpayers provide health insurance to you when there are poor Mainers that cannot afford health care? I would support a bill that says that we don't get health care as legislators unless we pass Maine care expansion. I voted 5 times to override the vetoes, to 5 times to expand health care and make it more affordable for Mainers. It's the biggest issue that we faced in this since I've been up there. I worked very closely with the Republican senators that tried to come up with a compromise bill that would allow this to get through. It was the most difficult, most contentious issue we had, and Senator Cates is one of the most respected legislators in the state of Maine, Republican senator, minority leader, assistant minority leader, very well-respected, intelligent, thoughtful Republican senator who led that. I serve on the Environment Committee with Senator Saviello, another moderate Republican. We worked very hard to come up with a compromise bill that could get the 2/3 override vote we needed, because we knew that it was going to get vetoed. And we did not get to that 2/3. And so that's maybe getting into the weeds more than we need to, but the point is, I think that the people that need this health care through the Affordable Care Act, the state not accepting that is a big mistake that I want to remedy.
respond. And that question is, in the upcoming election, question 1 has received a great deal of publicity. What is your position on using bait, dogs, or traps in bear hunting? Senator Boyle.
Well, I'm not a hunter myself, but my family members are hunters, and I spent, as I said earlier, the early part of my career in the North Maine woods, north of Millinocket. My father's from Rumford, my mother's from East Millinocket. Their families are still in those regions, and many of them are bear hunters. And so I've heard from them, as well as from constituents in this area. And in this area, there's more of a tilt towards yes on one. But throughout a lot of Maine, there's a lot of concern about that question, not just the way it's worded, but some of the premises behind it. And I'm going to be voting no on one as a licensed forester and a professional who spent his career in the Maine woods.
Thank you. Representative Volk.
I think it's always important when we consider legislation like this to look at other states and whether or not it's passed in other states. And when you do that on this particular issue, you see that in Massachusetts, where they passed a bill very similar to this, they actually have had a 500% increase in nuisance bear reports. And that can be very dangerous for citizens. So I definitely trust our wildlife biologists and our guides who recommend that we continue to allow this form of hunting.
Thank you. Moving on to the second talking point. You both want to talk about charter and public schools. Representative Volk, would you lead off with this question?
Thank
you. 5 minutes.
Well, this has been a particular passion of mine. I have a passion for meeting kids' needs. And they're inspired by raising our oldest child, who's now 23, a young adult, and he has Asperger's syndrome. And he had a very, very, very rocky journey through our public school system. And so I actually was the lead co-sponsor on the charter school bill in the 125th legislature, and I was very happy to see Maine become the 41st state to allow charter schools. And we are allowing a limited number of charter schools, a maximum of 10 as the law reads right now, and I believe we are at 7 currently. And I think that these charter schools are meeting a need for students. There is definitely an issue with the funding, and I actually was able to have a conversation with Commissioner Ryer last night, in fact, to talk about what his plan is, and it's actually very similar to legislation that was killed in the last session that would have remedied the funding situation, because currently school budgets, school boards are having a very difficult time forming a budget because they don't know until the very last second how many kids are going to be leaving their districts and enrolling in a charter school. So I would certainly support fixing that. We did a lot of great things over the last 4 years in terms of reforming education. We now have proficiency-based diplomas, and a lot of schools working very hard to figure out what that means, how they're going to document it for their students. We also have new ways of evaluating teachers, which I think are going to be very effective, and that was a result of a work group of people from Maine School Management, so school superintendents, as well as teachers. And then we also have a school evaluation system that has, I think, been very effective in making sure that residents understand how their schools match up with other schools around the state in very clear and black and white ways. And it also helps the schools and the staff and the school boards understand where they need to improve. And so I don't believe we need to do any more regarding school education reform other than fixing the charter school funding and supporting our schools as best we can.
Thank you. Senator Boyle.
Well, I support use of online education and learning for students. I'm not opposed to the idea of charter schools. We have charter schools, and we're giving them a shot here in Maine. And I recognize that not everybody's a fit for public schools, but as they're currently operating, but I would prefer to see the improvements made in the public schools themselves, with the funds not being taken away from those public schools that they need to make those changes. I recognize it's a thorny problem. I recognize that for some students and some families, they made a choice to pull their kids out and pursue another form of education. My concern is, and the concern actually more that's been expressed to me by administrators in the schools across this district, as well as from parents of other kids in public schools across the district, is that their kids are still in the public schools. The administrators still have to serve all those kids in the public schools. The schools themselves have maintenance costs that are not defrayed when you pull $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 per student out. So that's the concern that I have, and that's the concern that's been expressed. There were attempts in this last legislature to address that, but bipartisan solutions did not come forth. There was a lot of partisanship on this issue as well, which I think is unfortunate. And I think this is one issue where we probably could come to some agreement. But I don't think continuing down this path of siphoning off public dollars when there are school teachers who are doing the best they can with the limited funds they have. At the same time, the governor proposes to cut municipal revenue sharing, and that goes to the towns and helps, fund public education. So that it's a difficult issue. It is, but I think that's why we both wanted to talk about it. So that's my concern is siphoning off public dollars.
Thank you. Moving on to question 5, you'll each have 2 minutes to respond. How will you deal with the budget shortfall? Augusta has been committed to only dealing with one side of the budget by cutting expenses. Are you open to raising revenues, and if so, in what ways? Senator Boyle.
Well, Augusta, the question's a little misleading in the sense that the state has to balance our budget by Constitution. So the state, it's a difficult challenge to do, as Representative Sambor can attest as a member of the Appropriations Committee. And Andrew already touched on the efforts that committee goes through and brings forth a budget for the full legislature to vote on. So cutting costs is not the only way to solve a financial problem. It's not the same situation, but an analogy would be my own small business. The way we increase revenues is by getting more clients and increasing revenues that way. And I think in the same way, what we've talked about, or I've talked about earlier tonight, in growing the economy, is when you get people to grow their businesses like we've done here locally. The employees that they hire then pay their share of the taxes too, and we increase the revenue that way. It's not just about cutting costs, it's about increasing revenues by increasing everybody's income. And I also would support a closer look in a bipartisan way at our antiquated tax structure, and that includes corporate tax loopholes. We want to do it in a very careful and thoughtful way, and it's a very thorny problem up there in the halls of the State House, how to reform taxes. It's been tried by many others in past legislatures, and that conversation is ongoing. But I think we need to recognize that we have an opportunity here in Maine, coming out of this awful recession that we've been in, to grow the businesses that are succeeding, the high-tech biology businesses and actually agricultural businesses. A good example is the Broadturn Farm in Scarborough. It's taken an abandoned farm and grown it into a successful business and has won statewide awards for it. And they're employing people and they're paying taxes, and that's increasing the revenue for the state of Maine. One example, but there are multiple examples of farms and other businesses growing in Maine, and that's good for all of us.
Thank you. Representative Volk.
We are obligated to balance the budget, and one of the ways that we've done that is by cutting expenses in Augusta, but I think that most taxpayers appreciate that. One of the things that you do when money gets tight in your household is you look at, well, do I really need to have, 3 DVRs? Can I pay, can I buy the generic dishwashing detergent rather than the Dawn? And so we have cut our state budget, but only by about 1% over the last couple of years. So, we've barely been able to keep things on an even field. I would not be open to raising revenues, but I would be open to looking at collecting those revenues in a different way. And this kind of takes us back to the idea of the three-legged stool again and the comprehensive tax reform that's needed in the state. So again, I'd like to see a balance between property tax, income tax, and sales tax. And the sales tax does include being able to capture some of those taxes from visitors that flock to our state, 3, 4, 5 months out of the year, because it is a wonderful place to visit. And so I believe that is what would create a healthy economy in this state, and that would lead to a much healthier budget, an easier budget process. We can't cut our way or tax our way to prosperity. We have to invest in ways to grow our economy. And I believe that I have the ability to listen to businesses. I believe that my very strong rating by Mary and my endorsement by NFIB actually proves that businesses appreciate having my ear in Augusta so that they can do what they like to do, which is grow businesses in Maine.
Thank you. Question 6, you'll each have 2 minutes to respond. What is your opinion in regard to the changes made or suggested changes regarding the state welfare system? Examples are picture IDs on debit cards, required job searches, illegal to use for tobacco, liquor, and gambling, 5-year maximum benefit, and not to be used outside the state of Maine. Representative Volk.
Well, I have to say that when I'm doing doors, this is the issue that I hear the most about. And Democrats like to say that fraud and abuse don't add up to much. But what level is actually acceptable to them? I would maintain that to the average person, they have zero tolerance for fraud and abuse because they view that as money coming directly out of their pockets. And it is. People working to make ends meet have very little tolerance when they go to Hannaford and see people whom they perceive to be abusing the system. And they may or may not actually be abusing the system, but sometimes it's all about perceptions. We do know that right here in Gorham, along with the sex trafficking arrests that were made, one of the things they also discovered was illegal use of EBT cards. So this is a huge problem, and many, many other law enforcement have been saying this is a problem for a long time. So we actually now have photos going on EBT cards, and that's going to help ensure that the person who's using those funds is the person who's entitled to use those funds. Most people view welfare reform as something simple that we should all be able to agree upon. And it's mind-boggling to them that there were bills such as a bill that would have prohibited the purchase of junk food with food stamps, food that I don't feed to my children on a regular basis and that aren't healthy to begin with. My opponent actually voted against that. There was also another bill that would have asked people applying for benefits to perform a work search. They would have to just show proof of having searched for 3 jobs. Some states require as many as 10 jobs, and that was another bill that was defeated. And I think these are things that taxpayers would appreciate putting in place. So I agree that we need balance. We always need to be careful, especially when there might be children in the household, to make sure that they have what they need, but that people are not taking advantage of our generosity.
Thank you. Senator Boyle.
Well, first, let me be clear that fraud and abuse in any kind in the welfare system is unacceptable to me, period. And to be up here and to be talking about being bipartisan and then to be lumped in with somebody saying Democrats say it doesn't add up to much. It adds up, and it doesn't matter how much. All of it's unacceptable to me. So I don't know who those other Democrats are, but they're not in this room. None of it's acceptable. No fraud, no abuse. I never would accept that. I pay taxes for my business, I pay personal taxes, and I don't want my taxes going to anybody who's cheating the system, period. So I don't see that as a partisan issue, and I know that some people do, but I don't, and I don't like being accused of saying it doesn't add up to much, or even being lumped in with others that imply that. I voted to prohibit use of EBT, of TANF benefits for tobacco, liquor, gambling, lottery tickets, and bail. I voted, just one example. There are a lot of bills that we see, but it's wrong to accuse me of being supportive of people who cheat the system, and I don't.
Thank you. We'll move on now to the third talking point, and this is a topic of your choosing. You will have 5 minutes to talk about whatever it is you so choose. And Senator Boyle, could you lead us off?
Thank you. Well, I don't think I need 5 minutes. The topic of my choice is women's health care and choice. And I support a woman making their own choice, whether to end in a pregnancy, put a child up for adoption, or raise a child. And that conversation should happen with a woman and her doctor, and a woman should make that decision without interference from her employer or from government.
Thank you. Representative Volk.
Thank you. Well, I just wanted to talk about the forum before us had what are the two biggest issues facing the state. And we certainly have issues with healthcare delivery and budget problems, which we did have a chance to talk on, which is obviously a huge obstacle in this state. But I wanted to step back a bit and talk about how we can come up with policies to attract young people to Maine. And how do we retain those that grew up here, those that came here to go to college because they were attracted to Maine for whatever reason? How do we keep them here? And when you look at our aging workforce, when you consider a company like Volk Packaging that has been around for 45 years, has about 75 employees, has an average age of 46 and a half years. And you consider how many of those workers, some of whom have known my husband since he was barely out of diapers, are retiring. And we consider how is he going to go about replacing these individuals when young workers are so hard to come by in this state. We need to increase the number of young workers. We need more skilled workers, or we're not going to be able to compete, even if we lower our energy costs, even if we lower our income tax. And so I've served for the last 4 years on the State Workforce Investment Board, and one of the tasks that we've taken on is better lining up the skills training in the state with jobs that employers actually communicate to us that they need workers to perform. But I have a couple of ideas around that, and I want to tell you about a friend of ours from Burundi who came here around 8 years ago. And he and his wife barely spoke English. They started staying in a homeless shelter when they were first here because they didn't have any place else to go. And so what they did have and what they did bring with them was a desire to improve their lives. They had a 4-year-old at the time, and she was about 6 months pregnant. In that time, they have learned English. She has gone to school and gotten a degree from SMCC. They have worked, between the two of them, as many as 5 jobs at a time. And last week they put an offer on a house. Now that is the American dream. And I don't have any problem helping somebody like that who is willing to work their way off of the system and willing to work really hard, because we need people like that. We need them to come here and thrive in our state, to appreciate the safety that we offer here, the quality education that we offer here, and the quality of life. And so I would love to, and I look forward to working with Senator Collins and Senator King on this issue. I've had conversations with both of them, and with their staff about one of the biggest obstacles that new comers to this country face is that it takes so long for them to get a work permit. This couple that I'm talking about actually had to wait over a year before they received permission from our government to do what they wanted to do, which was to go to work. And so that needs to be fixed on the federal level. We have unprecedented access to our federal delegation here in Maine. We're very, very fortunate in that regard. And so I really look forward to working with them on this issue so that we can attract young people, skilled workers who come here from other countries as well as from other states. And then, of course, we want our kids to be able to come back here and make a living in Maine.
Thank you. We have a little bit of extra time, so I think we'll go into a few extra questions that we have. So Representative Volk, if you could answer this question first. If you could choose one government committee in Augusta to be appointed to, which one would it be and why?
I've really enjoyed my committee, so I have a feeling this isn't going to be the most exciting question. But as I've stated, I'm on the Labor, Commerce, Research, and Economic Development Committee. It is a mouthful, but we oversee the Department of Labor as well as the Department of Economic Community Development, and we regulate and oversee everything from licensing of hairdressers to surgeons, all of work law. I had the privilege of reforming our workers' compensation system in my first term in the legislature, and I should add that Senator Bartlett was actually one of the Democratic senators who voted in favor of that bipartisan legislation that has begun to help our workers' comp costs tick down a little bit in the state. We also touch such things as Maine State Housing Authority. We've cleaned up the waste and abuse that was going on in that department. And so it covers a wide variety of issues, and it's a very exciting committee. I've enjoyed it tremendously, so I don't think I'd want to change.
Thank you. Senator Boyle.
Well, I don't believe I got my closing statement.
That's going to come. That's still coming.
I thought that wasn't your closing statement prior to that?
No.
Oh, okay. My apologies. Well, yeah, I serve on two committees. I'm the Senate Chair of the Environment and Natural Resources Committee, and I'm also on the Agriculture, Conservation, Forestry Committee. I'm a licensed Maine forester. I'm nationally certified as a professional wetland scientist as well, and have a number of wetland scientists working for me. So that's the committee that I requested and was Senate Chair of, and I've worked in a very good bipartisan way with the Republicans on the committee and the Democrats and the one independent, and so that's the obvious committee for me, and I'd like to continue on that committee.
Thank you. We'll have one more question before the closing arguments, or closing statements. What policies do you believe need to be enacted to support Maine's growing immigrant and refugee population? Senator Boyle.
Well, I don't think there's a particular legislative bill we could pass that would make everything right. I think what we're trying to do and what we should continue to try to do is create jobs and support the public education system that we have, so that if there are children that move here and they're in public school systems, that they get support they need there. We should encourage them to go on to post-secondary education. Community college system makes a lot of sense, and I think probably the primary reason, aside from our democracy, that people come here for the freedom is for the education. So I don't think it's a particular policy or policies that need to be targeted at immigrants. What they want is an opportunity for the great American public education that they come by, that they would get by coming here.
Thank you. Representative Volk.
I agree that most of them are here for opportunity and protection. They come from a variety of countries, and in many of them they've had persecution that we can't even begin to imagine as Americans. One of the things that I think would be very helpful to ensure that the people who are here for the right reasons is limiting our welfare policies to a certain amount of time. So we've seen that with the limit of TANF to 5 years lifetime. We've actually seen a 50% reduction in the use of that program. So that would be one state policy that I think we need to reform. And then another would be what I talked about before, more on the federal level. We need to speed up the time it takes for immigrants and refugees and asylees to be able to be issued a work permit so that they are legally allowed to begin to earn their own living and begin to work their way out of poverty.
Thank you. And now we'll move to the candidate closing comments. Representative Volk.
Thank you, Dee Dee, and I want to thank Georgia and the people here at GoCat for hosting this forum. I think it's been good for both of us. When I knock on doors around the district in Gorham, Buxton, and Scarborough, what I find that most people are not partisan. They just want someone that they can trust to get the job done. And I believe that over the last 4 years, I've proven that I can be effective communicator as well as a very good listener. I've been a bridge builder, but I've also known when to stand firm. I think I've mentioned a few times, I'm very proud of my rating by the Maine Economic Research Institute as very strong, and I've been endorsed by the National Federation of Independent Business. But I've also received an A from the Maine Farm Bureau and an A from the Sportsmen's Alliance of Maine. And I'm also the highest scoring Republican from the League of Conservation Voters. If you check those scorecards, though, you're going to notice one thing, and that's that I never achieve 100%. And the reason for that is that I'm not beholden to any one special interest group. I don't agree with anybody 100% of the time, including the governor. In fact, I voted to oppose 1 in 5 of his vetoes. And I'm a very independent thinker. I'm beholden to no one and to no special interest group except for the voters who send me to Augusta. My number one priority is the people that I represent as a whole, not 1 or 2 pockets of individuals. I hope I've earned your vote over the last hour, and I thank you very much for having tuned in.
Thank you. Senator Boyle.
Thank you, Dee Dee. Thank you, Georgia. And thank you all for coming. I, too, have been around the district quite a bit. I've been to over 8,000 homes in a little over 2 years. There are somewhere between 8,000 and 12,000 people who will likely turn out to vote. I feel really strongly that when I've talked to the people and listened to the people on their doorsteps, that I have a good pulse of what they want, and I've also had a good response. I am a small business owner. That's what I talk about. That's what's important to me. That's how I spend my time when I'm not in the legislature. I love what I do, and I've been doing it for 18 years. And I also started a dance and event center in Westbrook in 2009. I gave up my ownership in that when I was elected in 2012. I've raised my children. They're both graduates of the University of Maine at Orono, like myself and my parents were. And they're both working full-time and supporting themselves here in the state of Maine. It's a story that gets a lot of smiles from people, because there are a lot of people out there who can't say that, who tell me about their kids going either away to college or away for work. So I do represent a lot of the people in the district in the sense that I live my life the way that they do, I think. And that's what resonates with people. That's what's important. Environmental and natural resource quality is also very important to the residents in the district. Other things that I'm concerned about that others share with me are global warming and climate adaptation. And those are issues that come in front of the committee that I chair. And while we haven't done much about that in the last 4 years in Maine, it remains a concern to a lot of people out here, and it hasn't been touched on much tonight. But it's a big issue that can be controversial and partisan, but it doesn't have to be. So for the people listening, for the people who are talking to me at the doors, that's a big concern, and it has a potential effect on our economy. And and I've touched on before, but I want to emphasize my support for public education. Pre-K has not been talked a lot about tonight, but it has been talked a lot about in Gorham. And it's very strongly supported in Gorham, and I've heard a lot about that too here in the district. So, and we need to fix the problem with the University of Southern Maine. It's a major concern for this municipality. A lot of layoffs, a lot of concern about the campus, and I've met with the president. I've met with the previous president before this current president was here, and meetings don't solve the problem, but it's a big problem, and I'm working on it. And I just want people to know that there are a lot of issues, and I'm doing the best I can to help the district and help the citizens. And I look forward to serving you again if you'll have me for the next 2 years. Thank you.
Thank you. We'd like to thank the candidates for their participation tonight. We encourage all voters to pursue more information available through other sources or by contacting the candidates individually. Voting locations in Gorham. Ward 1 votes at the Gorham Middle School on Weeks Road. Ward 2 votes at the Shaw Gym located at the Municipal Center on South Street. You can also register to vote in person at the Town Clerk's office located at the Municipal Center at 75 South Street. Regular business hours for the Town Clerk's office are Monday through Wednesday, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Thursday there are extended hours, 8 a.m. to 6:30 p.m., and Friday from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. You may also register to vote on Election Day. If you're not able to vote on Election Day, you may call or visit the clerk's office to get an absentee ballot until Thursday, October 30th. The office will be open until 7 p.m. on that evening. For more information or to contact the town clerk, please call 222-1670. The program tonight, Meet the Candidates for State Senate, will be available for streaming video at the town's website, www.gorham-me.org. On behalf of the staff of Gorham Government Education Television, I'm Dee Dee Perkins reminding you to vote on Tuesday, November 4th. Thank you and good night.